So we have our last speaker ready in the wings to come up and talk to us. Kirby Fry went to school at Texas A&M. He has a degree in forestry. He was also in the Peace Corps. Maybe he'll tell us where he was. But he's also spent 20 years installing perennial food gardens and building natural houses with straw bales and adobe bricks. He's with a company called ThoughtBarn, and so you can oh, no. Oh, I don't know where I got that. Okay, so he's going to tell you about himself. Please welcome Kirby Fry.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm Kirby Fry. I live northeast of Austin near Elgin, Texas, and did indeed graduate from Texas A&M University with a degree in forestry sciences. And if I've learned anything as a builder, sometimes you have to see something and do something to know that's not what you want to do or be. So learning about forestry at Texas A&M was like, okay, that's not what I want to do. And then I joined the Peace Corps, and I served in Guatemala, and it was probably the best Peace Corps assignment that you could get. Close enough that your family could come and visit you, and near enough that I could go back and visit where I worked after I'd gotten out of the Peace Corps. And in the Peace Corps, we did agroforestry, and so we were working in the highlands with the Mayans, hiking through Mayan ruins every day, going to work and building conservation terraces and planting trees for fuel wood and construction and tool handles. And so there were a lot of great things that I really liked about the Peace Corps. What I didn't like was how compartmentalized it was. They deliberately split the Peace Corps volunteers up so we didn't hang out together and speak English all the time. So I was in a town where we did trees. You know, that town down the road, they did small animal systems and community health in another town. And when I got back to the States, you're still chomping at the bit. You still want to try to save the world. I stumbled onto something called permaculture design. And permaculture, all that really means is permanent agriculture. And where the Peace Corps broke us up into these narrow disciplines, permaculture was integrating everything together and doing as much as you possibly could on one site with as few resources as you possibly could. So permaculture, the short definition of it is that it's a design system for sustainable living. And I really want us to talk more about what it is to be sustainable. A sustainable system pays for itself over time. And one of the examples I'd like to use, Ted, coming up on the slideshow whenever, is rainwater collection. And another thing I'd like us to talk about are some of the trends and incentives that exist in Austin right now for sustainable design. And rainwater is a great example. So if a system is going to pay for itself over time and the cost of its maintenance, how do we measure that? Well, let's take rainwater collection, for instance, which the city of Austin offers rebates for. So say you spend $1,000 on a cistern. How many times does that cistern have to fill up before it finally pays for itself over time? And so in a little bit, we'll take a drop of water off your roof into a tank, pressurize it, pump it back through the house, use it as your primary drinking water and cooking and cleaning water, and then harvest that water again once it's outside of the house in a gray water harvesting system, which the city also promotes, gray water harvesting. And I don't know if anybody remembers, it made the newspaper for a while. I was on Austin Water Utilities Gray Water Working Group, and the city was going through the 2009 Universal Plumbing Code and then updating that plumbing code to the 2012 Universal Plumbing Code. And a lot of concessions were made. There's still a few speed bumps, but it is legal to harvest your gray water in Austin. And probably what the city would complain about the least is harvesting your laundry machine's water. And the city of San Francisco has a great program called Laundry to Landscape. There's an excellent video of how to install this system on YouTube, and it's put out by This Old House. So if you just type in This Old House Gray Water Harvesting, it's a really great, like 10-minute how-to video on how to get that gray water, two separate words, G-R-A-Y, gray water, out of the laundry machine and into your landscape. And so this completes the system or the circle and becomes a working definition of what a sustainable system is, because you're collecting all of the water that you use. I've been collecting rainwater now for 20 years. It's exclusively what I use on my property. I live in a straw bale house. I've got 11,000 gallons of rainwater storage capacity. that water goes through my house, and every drop of water that I use then goes out into the landscape, either in a gray water harvesting system or a black water harvesting system. So one of the objectives of permaculture design is to eliminate the possibility of waste. So you can leave the water running on in my house, and you don't have to feel bad about that, because it was delivered to my site by the sky. And every drop of water that comes through my drain system goes out into the landscape and supports an orchard and a perennial food garden, and we're going to talk about that too. So let's take a look at some rainwater collection systems here. See if I can figure out how to use this thing. So this is a 1,000-gallon cistern. Blue Scope makes this tank. It's an all-metal tank. You'll find that a lot of clients don't want to have the polyethylene or the fiberglass cisterns. They're just not that attractive. This cistern cost $1,800. So that's like $1.80 per gallon of storage. Fiberglass tank will run you about 60 cents per storage, and a polyethylene or plastic tank will run you about 50 cents per storage. Now this tank is exclusively used just for irrigating the garden. So, and any water that comes out of that tank overflows into the landscape into a series of basins that have garden beds built over them. We also cut through the curb of the street to let water in off the street into this front yard. And a lot of this is coming from Brad Lancaster out of Tucson, Arizona, who talks about harvesting rainwater in arid landscapes, and we're semi-arid landscape. And he spoke here in City Hall 7 years ago and was the one that really got the city of Austin to reconsider its policies on gray water harvesting. Okay, so this is a 1,000-gallon tank. It would probably have to fill up 100 times before it pays for itself. And once a system finally pays for itself and what it takes to maintain that system, but keeps yielding something after that, that system then becomes regenerative. So let's see. Okay. Now this is a larger tank. That first tank was 1,000 gallons. This tank is at least 10,000 gallons. We did not install this tank. Probably someone like Chris Maxwell Gaines with Innovative Water Solutions. This is right across the street from the City Hall of Sunset Valley. And those guys are really on it when it comes to sustainable design systems. So the water actually passes underneath the parking lot, comes up through the ground in that image, and the initial wash goes into that large chamber off to the side, so all the debris coming off the roof has somewhere to go, and then that water slowly leaks out over time, and then the water goes into the tank and is stored there until it's needed for their community garden. A lot of people want to collect rainwater and then they don't want to pressurize it. Well, I always advocate pressurizing the water, because when you need it, it's there. If you've just got a gravity flow system, you can go to fill up a 5-gallon bucket and say, oh, I'll be right back. And then you wake up in the middle of the night and you've drained half your tank. So pressurizing it costs a little bit more. It's a little bit more paperwork with the city, but it's well worth it. And this is how you get it into your house. And you can put all the filters you want on these systems. So generally, there's a coarse filter that gets sediment out. That's just a paper filter. Then there's a charcoal filter that gets any kind of odor out and odd tastes. Because sometimes in the middle of summer, the inside of your tank smells and tastes a little bit like a fish tank. And then at your kitchen sink, you can have an ultraviolet filter that filters it one more step and kills all the microbes in it. So we've pressurized the water. We're using it inside of our house. And here we are cutting into a cast iron waste system and about to divert the water that's going to the city's wastewater treatment facility into the landscape outside of this home. So this is like 3 or 4 inch cast iron pipe. We literally had to cut through the steel, water and scum. It's amazing what you see inside of some of these pipes. Spraying everywhere. Ted, there you go. And now we've diverted all the water from like 2 bathtubs, a bathroom sink, and a laundry machine. And they're going to go outside into the landscape, and yet we can still divert that water back into the city's wastewater treatment system if the owner wants to sell the house or if it's been raining a lot. Next slide. And then there it is going out into a mulch-filled basin. And that's just a $10 valve box with a lid on it. And yeah, you got to go in there and muck that thing out every couple of years. You could leave the valve box off and just let that water go into that basin. And then we've planted fruit trees along that basin. And we're going to talk a lot more about swales and berms and conservation terraces and how to collect and store water in the landscape. Okay? So that's delivering the water into a mulch basin. The next way of delivering water into the landscape, and this is what they talk about in This Old House, Laundry to Landscape in San Francisco, this is the branching drain system. And so instead of just dropping the water into one large basin, because it takes a lot of water to flood that basin and reach the trees, more effective but more expensive is using the branching drain system. And so basically here we've got a kitchen sink and a laundry machine. It comes out of the house. I don't have a laser pointer, but where all that handwriting is, that's the house. The other rectangle is the driveway. A 1.5-inch line comes out of the house, and then it just starts 45-degree branching into little planting basins that have those valve boxes on them. And each one of those valve boxes has a tree planted right next to it. So each tree has its own individual delivery system. Okay? And here we are laying out the PVC next. About to dig the trenches, making sure that the pipes have the right pitch on them. And next. And then that delivers to where each individual tree goes. And so this is just one illustration of what a sustainable system is. It's a closed-loop system where every drop of water you use is being harvested and utilized in the landscape. And I've always wanted to coordinate Austin Water Utilities' gray water harvesting program with like an urban forestry program, say, sponsored by Tree Folks, where we nurture and improve the urban forest inside the city of Austin. What I'd like to continue talking about now are some of the opportunities for you guys in sustainable design and some of the incentives that exist through the city. And I've been teaching permaculture design now in Austin for about 15, going on 20 years. I'm starting to forget how long it's been. So there are a lot of our students out there who are very interested in sustainable design. And even longer ago than that was when the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1920s and 30s began fighting the Dust Bowl with conservation terraces. And so one of our primary tools that we use in the field to conserve water and to eliminate soil erosion completely are these conservation terraces. And we're going to talk a lot about that because as landscapers, I think it's a really good method for eliminating soil erosion and conserving as much water as you possibly can in the garden systems that you build. And I'd like to elaborate a little bit further, like permaculture is a design system for sustainable living. And I've been asked, well, what makes it a system? And let me just point out that permaculture design is not a collection of designs. It's like you can't just pick out a bunch of cool designs and say that this is permaculture. What makes it as a system is that we have a set of ethics and we have a set of principles that we adhere to. All professional societies have canons and mores that kind of direct and dictate what ethical behavior is. And the ethics are very simple, and that is care of the earth, specifically care of the soil, care of all species, and return of surplus to the system that generated that surplus. And so when we talk about care of the earth, care of soils, a lot of people also ask me, what's the difference between permaculture design and organic farming? And I'm a builder, so I have some building analogies. I think the keystone of permaculture design, or the cornerstone rather, that which holds it up over time, is soil conservation. That is the first thing that we always do in permaculture. You can be an organic farmer, and soil conservation is like a checkbox out of a list of 20 different things. And I go to all these organic farms, and God love them, as my mother would say. They're plowing up and down these slopes, and there's erosion going on between their windrows. And soil conservation, they care about the quality of the soil because that improves their vegetables, but they're not always guarding all the soil that's washing straight off their slopes. So soil conservation is the cornerstone of permaculture design. The keystone of permaculture design, that which holds it up over time, is that we use a lot of perennial food plants. And when we talk about permanent agriculture, this is a big part of what makes these systems more permanent. In an annual agricultural system, we're basically starting from a blank slate 2 or 3 times a year, plowing those fields over and over again, sometimes straight up and down a field because that's the longest fence line, might be going straight up and down a field. And if you look into some of the old documents of the Civilian Conservation Corps, they were losing 65 tons of soil per acre per year where farmers were growing corn straight up and down their fields. And so Texas, since 1850, has probably lost 6 or 7 feet of topsoil and biomass across the entire state. And so we've started an organization called the Earth Repair Corps, spinning off of what the Civilian Conservation Corps was doing 70, 80 years ago, picking up the yoke and carrying the designs and methods of soil conservation forward. And so let's go into the next slide. And this just illustrates, what a basic conservation terrace might look like. The ones we build are a lot bigger than this. They're a lot smoother and gentler. And you'll hear me use the term swale. Well, think of like the sway back of a horse. It's like the low spot. And then the dirt that comes out of the swale becomes the berm. And that's basically like a raised garden bed. And the first thing you have to do when building these conservation terraces or swales and berms is get your laser level out or hose level. We use transits, construction levels, laser levels. You can take a clear tube of water, fill that tube up with water, put a yardstick at either end, and use that to find level on a hillside. And if anybody's been hiking or looked at the U.S. Geological Survey maps, they've got topographical lines on them. Those are contour lines. And so if you dug a ditch on a contour line and filled that ditch up with water, that water wouldn't go anywhere. The water just rises at the same level. And that's actually how they used trenches filled with water to level the base of the Great Pyramids in Egypt. So this is a really old method of catching and distributing water. Like in the Philippines, they've got the terrace culture. You'll see in National Geographic all those beautiful pictures of the terraces in Asia and Indonesia. So this is one of our primary tools that we use in permaculture design in landscaping. Now, permaculture design is not just about landscaping, though that's what we're primarily talking about. I'm a builder, and so my goal as a builder is to build homes that actually pay you to live in them. Like, what if you lived in a home that collected every drop of water that you used, that generated all of the electricity and energy that you needed to heat and cool the house and operate all your appliances? What if it even earned you an income? The city of Austin used to promote duplexes. I think, having a duplex and leasing out half your home to help pay for your mortgage would be a great way to build a home that paid you to live in it. So let's move on and talk briefly about the principles of permaculture design. There's 3 of them. It's very simple. This is what makes it a design system and not just a collection of designs. One is that we're always trying to get the biggest bang for our buck. And that's simply efficiency. So if you put $100 into the system, you want that $100 to yield as much as it possibly can. And I think perennial food plants and the conservation terraces do that. The second design principle of permaculture design is that every element in the system should have multiple functions. And so the roof is another great example. Like, how many uses can we come up with for our roof? Keeps the water off your head, keeps you cool and warm through the seasons. Put gutters on that house, hook those gutters up to a cistern, and now that roof is collecting rainwater. Put photovoltaic panels on that roof, and now it's generating electricity. And you can even put solar thermal water heaters on your roof to help heat your water. So a roof can have at least 3 or 4 different functions. And every element in a permaculture landscape is designed to have as many functions as possible. And ultimately, the only thing that limits the number of those functions is our imagination and our potential as designers. So the more we dive into this, every element should have at least 3 functions in a landscape, could have even more. The third principle of permaculture design is that every essential function is supported by multiple elements, and that's redundancy. So efficiency, multiple functions, and redundancy. It's very simple, but these are the guidelines and the canons and ethics that help steer our decision-making as sustainable designers. So I've been teaching these permaculture design classes twice a year now. As a matter of fact, Paul Ovasi over there just took one of our permaculture classes. So there are a lot of people out there looking for these systems to be installed, and I don't have the time or the crew or the people power to be doing all of the installations. And as a way of keeping our students and graduates together, we have a Facebook group called Texas Permaculture Design Projects, and that grew into a volunteer group where once a month for the last 4 years we've been installing perennial food gardens all around Central Texas. I think we're approaching now 40 gardens that we've installed. And we call these events permablitzes because we get so much done in such a short period of time. As a matter of fact, our next permablitz is tomorrow in Leesville, Texas. They're 2-day events. They're from 9 to 5, Saturday and Sunday. A lot of people say, oh, I can't make it on Saturday. I'm like, it's also on Sunday. And they don't come then either, so that's all right. We got a lot of people who show up. And then our next permablitz in February is going to be near Martindale, east of San Marcos. And it's a working farm. And these events are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And the elements that I always try to include in the permablitzes is that we do some kind of soil conservation. So we're almost always building conservation terraces, swales, and berms. That we use perennial food plants. And this includes all the fruit trees that you can think of that do well in this climate. Pomegranate, pear, Asian persimmon, those are probably some of the toughest, hardiest trees that you can grow here. They hardly need any water, just a little bit to get established. Then we grow a lot of fig, peaches, plums. Those do fairly well. They take a little bit more water. We've been working with the Satsuma orange, just kind of pushing the boundaries. We'll grow olives a little bit to the south and on dry hillsides. And then you're also talking about grapes and brambles, which are like blackberries and raspberries, and any kind of other perennial food plant. We use pineapple, guava, asparagus, artichoke, and we love all of the native plants and grasses. The technical definition of permaculture, I gave you the short definition of permaculture, that it's a design system for sustainable living. But if you go to the Permaculture Designer's Manual, permaculture is the conscious design, creation, and maintenance of an agriculturally productive ecosystem that has the stability, resilience, and diversity of a natural ecosystem. So a permaculture is not just a collection of cultivated fruit trees. And what makes our gardens regenerative, number one, is the conservation terraces, because we're collecting huge amounts of water in the swales, in the basins. But the other thing that we plant alongside the fruit trees, we call them support species. And so we plant a lot of native leguminous trees. And so this is like arroyo sweetwood, golden ball lead tree, Eve's necklace, redbud, all sorts of acacias, catclaw acacia, whitethorn acacia, and even, yes, mesquite. Sometimes we plant mesquite. But there's enough mesquite where we really don't need to plant any. And what do these trees do? What makes these trees regenerative? Well, we also refer to them as farmers' trees, and they're deep-rooted, so they're pulling up minerals from deep underneath the soil that aren't available to the plants that we're cultivating. And cultivated plants or hybridized plants like your plum trees and peach trees, they're kind of weak trees. They need all the help they can get. And so these farmers' trees, they're also pioneering trees. So they stabilize the local environment around our fruit trees and asparagus and pineapple, guava and sweet potato. They're bringing up minerals from deep underneath the ground. Then they're depositing those minerals along the conservation terrace. And that's really what makes these gardens regenerative systems, like giving back more than they take over their lifetime. And I remember after I got out of the Peace Corps, I was very wide-eyed and inspired, but I was also overly philosophical and a little dismayed at how messed up the world was. And I thought, well, the best thing I could do is just remove myself from the planet. You know, my mother broke into tears. She's like, oh, my God. I'd never, but instead, after I studied permaculture design, I'm like, wait a minute. No, we can give back to the planet more than we take. And so that's what I've been at ever since that point when I realized that through good design, we can actually give back more than we take. And that's what we mean when we talk about regenerative systems that are actually yielding more energy and food than it took to create those systems. So the permablitzes, they've got the soil conservation terraces, the perennial food plants, the support species, which are the farmers' trees, but not only that, we put out a lot of cover crops. In the Peace Corps, we called this green manure. So in the winter, we put out clover and vetch and winter pea, cilantro, parsley, dill, fennel, carrot. We put out turnips, radishes, kale, collard greens, and all sorts of winter grasses like winter ryegrass, oat, and wheat. And it's just phenomenal what you can get away with in Texas winters. It's the summers that are the real challenge. I mean, the best growing season and the best planting season for me is from September through December, and then, you know, coming out of the winter into spring, and then everything kind of settles down over the summer, and hopefully your irrigation system works, which is another element of the permablitzes. So we've got soil conservation, perennial food plants, the support species. We always put out some form of irrigation. I prefer drip irrigation. Some people insist on really interesting things like the oyas, the unglazed ceramic pots that you bury in the ground. But then somebody has to go around filling those up every week or every other week. But they release water slowly deeper underground, which is where those roots are. And so we've had some of our permaculture gardens just exclusively watered with the oyas. And then we put out soft rock minerals, because you got to remember 6 to 7 feet of Texas topsoils have washed away. So any trace minerals that were available at the surface they're all down in the creeks or in the Gulf of Mexico now. So we go to Natural Gardener in southwest Austin. We go to Bloomers to the northeast near Elgin, and we generally put out soft rock phosphate, green sand that has potassium and magnesium in it, pelletized sulfur, and yes, we'll even put out agricultural lime on black clay, because you're not going to raise the pH of your soil with a half a bag of lime, and two, a lot of that lime is not available to the plants. And so we make that lime available by putting out a little bit of ag lime, and then we'll put out like Rabbit Hill Farm trace minerals, and so then you're getting the selenium, molybdenum, boron, zinc, magnesium. And then usually we will also inoculate our plants with a biotone product like organic slow-release fertilizer 622, and it's got the mycorrhizal fungal inoculant in it. And sometimes if we can find it, we'll buy the bacteria inoculate. It's a rhizobia bacteria, and you put that on your clover, and then that gets the bacteria growing on the clover roots that helps fix nitrogen in the soil. So we've talked about the elements of a permablitz. Ted, now let's go through what a permablitz looks like. Oh, this is Festival Beach Food Forest. This was the permablitz that we did in October of 2015. This is one of the City of Austin's first ungated community gardens, and that was a really big deal because I didn't realize it, but all of the city community gardens that are sponsored by the city have fences and gates around them. So when we told them this wasn't going to be a fenced-in or gated community garden, it just threw us out of any boxes that the city had to put us in. And basically what we've done here is we went out with our laser level and we laid out lines on contour so that if you dug a ditch, they would fill up uniformly with water. And then we rented an excavator or a little mini track hoe, and we dug on the uphill side, and then the dirt that comes out of the swale becomes the berm. And whenever we build gardens and parks, you got to think about who is going to be managing that garden. People are going to be mowing. Anytime you disturb the soil, what's the first thing that germinates? Like the sunflowers and the ragweed and the doveweed. And so you're going to have an explosion of forbs. And so all of our earthworks are very gentle and very smooth. I like to think that somebody on a little riding lawnmower could just ride right up alongside those earthworks there, okay? We built these earthworks on October 28th, and October 29th is when we had the massive Halloween floods. These earthworks were completely underwater for about 6 hours. We have pictures where there's water, looked like a small lake, about 200 or 300 foot wide, of about 1.5 feet of standing water for just a few hours. But they held up really well. And what hopefully you can see in this image is that any water in the bottom of that terrace or swale, if it's 1 inch of water, it's 1 inch of water along the entire length of that basin. And what we're trying to do is slow the water down as it moves through the landscape, spread it out, and cause it to in-soak into the ground. And they will overflow. And we're never trying to hold back water above grade. So the system is designed to let the water out at grade. So you're only going to hold water where you've actually dug. Like the berm is a platform for your fruit trees. It's not a dam that's meant to hold back water. But it's a very stout berm, okay? And then this was November 7th, Tree Folks, Festival Beach Food Forest. It was a huge event. This was towards the end of the day, but that's the same earthworks, and it's been planted with a fruit tree on the berm about every 12 to 15 feet. I wanted to turn the park into a fruit calendar, and so I wanted, like, if citrus was fruiting in November, you know, that would go at 11 o'clock, and if your loquats were fruiting in January, that would go at 12 o'clock, and then your plums and pears and peaches and figs, and finally it ends up with your pomegranates that are ripe in September or November. Instead, the committee got a hold of my design and just randomly threw all the trees out there. But this one berm is now the fruiting calendar. And so from left to right, you know, if you see one tree fruiting, you know what's to the left of it just fruited and what's to the right of it is going to be fruiting. So it's like the Rosetta Stone of what's going to be ripe in the garden. And I've always wanted to create stepping stones that have printed on them like planting calendars. And then you glaze that and texture the top of it so you don't slip on it, so that like all your stepping stones out in the park have some hidden message in them. Okay, next. So this is another conservation terrace. It's on the opposite side of the park. Go ahead. Just another example. This one had a little bit more water in it. There is a valve box in the image, and that's where the irrigation system is. And so we put drip irrigation along the berm. And all of the cultivar fruit trees, the best place for those trees is right on the center of the top of that berm. You can plant the same tree on top of a berm and one on the flat ground below or above the berm. And the tree that's on the berm will grow 3 to 5 times faster than the tree that's just on bare ground. It's a little counterintuitive. I don't know what it is. And it doesn't even have to have the swale around it. It could just be a big raised mound. So all the primary cultivar fruit trees go on the berm, and then the farmer's trees, the support species, the native leguminous trees, they get planted above the swale so that the leaf litter from those trees falls into the swale and contributes minerals and organic matter to the swale. And what I like to do, if we can afford it, is we completely fill the swale up with mulch, like chipped trees, and you don't even know that that's a swale when you're done. It makes a really great path. Okay, and so there we are planting it. This swale was just a really great example. I mean, it's only about 100 feet long. We dug all the structures in one day. It took 3.5 years of planning, but we dug all the structures in one day. Anytime you're working with a city, you know, you got to tack on an extra couple of years of planning and design and permitting. Okay, Ted. Here we are at Eastside Memorial High School. This is over there off of Boehm and Gardner Street, I think, or some such street like that. This is inside of a courtyard, and I don't know, there's something really amazing about this courtyard. It could be all the water coming off the roofs. It could be the energy of the people walking by it. And the teachers love it because a lot of people walking in the courtyard are like waving at the students through the windows. But now our garden has grown up so much that there's a little bit of privacy so the students don't interact through the windows during class. Go ahead, Ted. And boom, that is 1.5 years later. Each one of those trees went from being about 3 or 4 feet tall to about 8 or 10 feet tall in 1.5 years. Now, not all of the gardens come out this well. Like I say, there's something special about this garden. And, you know, whenever we plant gardens, we're always also planting butterfly gardens. And some of my favorite combinations of plants, I like to have that tall, obedient plant in the middle. It's got that purple spire flower. And in the back of that, I have the yellow and orange lantana. And then in the front of that, I like to put the Mexican butterfly weed. It's yellow and orange too. And then at the feet of the garden, we put out a lot of Greg's Mist and then some catmint underneath the Greg's Mist, because the Greg's Mist is a little wispy and it needs something to back it up. So all of those butterfly plants are in that garden. I mean, right now, asparagus is available in the nursery, so everybody needs to run out and buy like 200 asparagus. And anywhere you've got a garden bed, every 2 linear feet, you need to have asparagus in your gardens. You can use asparagus ornamentally. I mean, it's a really great textured plant. You could be putting out artichoke every 6 feet. And then at the base of the berms, we plant a lot of sweet potato. The great thing I like about sweet potato is that it can actually shade out Bermuda grass. And so that's what we're doing here is, and again, it comes down to who's maintaining the garden. Well, the custodial staff, they can just mow right up to the edge of the sweet potato, and the sweet potato helps keep down the Bermuda grass on the berm. But there's almost every kind of fruit tree you can think of in that on that berm. And when we built the terraces, the students had no idea what we were doing. They're like, you guys are just crazy. Like, all this extra work. Why don't you just stick those trees in the ground? Then it rained, and the swales filled up with water, and the students went out and shot a video of the structure filled up with water, and they were just, suddenly they got it, you know? And it's great when a design or an installation is like a standalone lesson for the people who visit it. And I think every garden should have something that lures people into it, gives them a place to sit down and hang out. A lot of people who take our permaculture design classes, the first thing they want to do is spread out a bunch of cardboard and kill their grass and plant a bunch of trees and never weed again. And then your neighbors are like, what the heck are they doing over there? You know, but I'm like, no. It's got to be beautiful. It's got to look and feel good. And ultimately, you want your gardens to like elevate the consciousness of the people who are in them. Like when you're listening to a song and it inspires you. So you want to create a space that lifts people's decision-making and their consciousness up to a higher level. And so when you build a garden and people walk up to it and they see that water in there and they get it. Of course, a lot of people are like, what about the mosquitoes? You know, and well, hopefully the swales drain after 2 or 3 days. They're designed to soak water into the ground. If you're worried about mosquitoes, we do like to fill the swales up with mulch, and that keeps the mosquitoes from laying eggs in the water. Okay, Ted? Here we are at Bar Mansion. This is 290 near Springdale off of Sprinkle Road. This is a wedding venue and like a meeting venue. A lot of our permaculture design course graduation events are held at Bar Mansion. Melanie McAfee is the owner of Bar Mansion. That's Gail Borst in the picture and Amy Jones. Gail is an architect and Amy is the groundskeeper for Bar Mansion. And they wanted to come, and I love this. Now, they're French formal there, but they're also certified organic farm. And so all of their gardens are very tidy and very neat. You walk around, you can identify what the plants are. You know, there's little clusters of mint and parsley everywhere, and you can eat as you move through the landscape. And so here we are measuring out where a conservation terrace should go. Ted, thank you. And basically, digging these things is pretty easy. We dig right down the center of it first and get a full shovel head deep in the middle. So they're generally only a foot deep, and the berms are hardly ever more than a foot tall. And then we excavate the half of the swale on the downhill side, get that dirt out of the way, and then we excavate the soil on the uphill side of the swale. And that's what it looks like when it's finished. It's very easy to walk across. Originally, when I started building these swales and berms, they were steep and deep. And if the sidewalls of your swale are too steep, they won't revegetate. So everything's designed to be, think like golf course. You know, like I freaking love golf courses. Like those guys who build all those ponds and those little hills and everything's so smooth and gentle. You know, if you know, like when Y2K was going to happen, I was going to go move on a golf course. You know, turn half of it into sustainable housing and turn the other half into permaculture gardens. They got a lot of ponds on golf courses too. So very gentle earthworks, French formal in this setting. And then a couple years later, okay, Ted, that's what it looks like now. You can't even see the conservation terrace anymore. We just completely filled it up with bark mulch. And we did plant a lot of 65-gallon holly trees and magnolia trees. Because if anybody's ever been to Bar Mansion, there is a crazy busy intersection right at the front of the facility where they have weddings and take photo ops. And so the owner, the client, Melanie McAfee, she's like, we got to do something about all this noise and just brakes locking up. And so that's the last of my slides. What I really want to impart to you guys is that there is a large and growing community of clients and very interested people in sustainable design in Austin. If you can start talking to them about on-contour tillage, if they're organic farmers, or conservation terraces on contour, rainwater collection systems, gray water harvesting systems. The city also gives rebates. The swale and berm was the first rebated rainwater garden by the city of Austin. It was one we built at Blackshear Elementary School over there near Chicone and 11th Street or somewhere like that. So the city is giving rebates for almost every single one of these designs. I don't think they're giving rebates for gray water harvesting, but they do allow you to do that. Did someone say yes or no? Yeah, they're not that advanced yet. I think it ought to be mandatory. No, that'd be a lot of work. But in the city of Tucson, Arizona, all new construction has to be plumbed for gray water harvesting. So there is a market out there, and we have basically built this market. I mean, I'm so busy right now building houses, building gardens, I'm almost afraid to answer my phone sometimes. So there's a lot of work out there. And again, my business is Southern Exposure. I do a lot of consulting. Our nonprofit organization is Earth Repair Corps. We have these events. The Permablitz is once a month from September through May, and sometimes we get really hardcore and build gardens in June, but we don't plant in June because really in Texas everything revolves around the planting windows, which are mid-fall and early spring, late winter. Let's see. So we've got the city rebate programs, the Permablitzes, the permaculture design classes, and opportunity and training events like this one. And again, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I totally lost track of time. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I brought some bumper stickers and Earth Repair Corps patches up here. Free.
I have a question. Looking at kind of the size and scope of what you've done, is there a limit to how small you could take that? For example, if you have a small 20 foot by 20 foot, can you take that swale and berm down to 1 or 2 trees? Or is it
absolutely. And I call those garden swales. And the site can dictate, like, this swale may only be 2 feet wide and 6 inches deep. And we'll do tree boomerangs around trees where we'll dig a little moat around the drip line of a tree and then pull that soil out beyond the drip line, and that'll collect water. And conversely, you can build little mounds with moats all the way around them.
So you're not necessarily limited to a linear design?
No.
Okay.
What works about the linear is that the dirt that comes out of the swale goes right below it. And it, like some of the rainwater gardens that Lancaster and the city of Austin promote, you're left with like 2 or 3 yards of soil, and you're like, what do I do with this now? And so you go build some little hill and put a tree on it or something. But no, all I really like is that they're smooth and gentle, and that somebody's not going to fall into one at night when they can't see, which does happen. It's all about safety. All right, well, thanks a lot, y'all.
All right. Hey, you're going to get out of class early today. Thank you, Kirby. Thank you for all the other speakers that are still here. It was just really a very inspiring day. I hope you guys got some good information from it. Please fill out your evaluations. You can just set them up there by the parking thing stamp. If you need your parking ticket stamped again, I'll be up there just for a little while. I don't want to stick around too long. Take all your stuff with you. Our next class is in 2 weeks. It's gonna be water conservation and water quality. There's gonna be Chris Charles from Austin Water, so he can answer your questions if you have questions about the Rainscape rebate. We're gonna have engineers from Watershed Protection talking about designing rain gardens. So I think it's gonna be really great. So, and also Kirby, I am so sorry I had the name of your company wrong. So sorry about that. All right, thank you guys. We'll see you in 2 weeks, hopefully. Oh, if you came just to today and you want to come to some of the other days, the deadline is the Wednesday before the class. So if you decide you want to come to some more, sign up.